Good afternoon to anybody out there. Uh, to all my millions of worldwide fans, hello and good afternoon. It may not be afternoon where you are located, but greetings. Hope everybody is well. Wanted to talk about a bunch of topics, so I'm going to say it off the top. This is what I'm going to talk about. They have a lot of these topics don't relate to each other, so if you want to bail at any point in time, feel free. Won't take offense. Obviously, this is not legal advice; it's opinion, and even though I say that, he still can get sued for it. But it's just my thoughts about various topics for whatever they're worth, which may not be a lot, but they're for whatever they're worth. So what I'm going to talk about today um, is GTII, which will be the first topic, MicroStrategy and crypto in general, LA and weather and water and all that stuff. Then Elon Musk, the Nazis, and a movie review about the September 5. That's the name of the movie. So that's the order of events, and hopefully it will be of interest to some of you. Before I start, of course, what do you get when you mix a rhetorical question with a joke? What do you call a magical dog? What breed? I think it's called a Labracadabra. And last but not least, I went to this restaurant and it advertised that they served breakfast at all times. So what I did is I ordered blueberry pancakes during the dark ages. Anyway, starting with GTII. So, and again, greetings to everybody behind me, that away. That's funny because the picture actually fits it because the mountain over this shoulder, one of the shoulders actually exists, even though it's not the correct mountain. And there are a lot of trees, although there's a lot of oak trees out there. But behind me is Malibu, and then Palisades is the other way, that away. And there's no more fires there, although there are probably firemen. Actually, I know for sure there are firemen still there because I drove down to Pacific Coast Highway. If you take the street that's to my right, first block, you go all the way down it, you go to Pepperdine University. That had suffered some prior fires right around it. If you turn left going south on Pacific Coast Highway, which borders the coast, obviously, that takes you down towards the Palisades. I tried doing that because I wanted to see what it looked like in terms of more of the coastal and the other areas. I drove about, and this was last week, middle of the week, so not long ago. Fires were calm. But about a mile down from Pepperdine, if any of you know where that is, to the south, there was a roadblock with the National Guard, and they turned everybody around. I think only residents only could drive down PCH, also Pacific Coast Highway. But the fires are out and are basically out. There's firemen still manning the scene because I think they take great care to make sure everything is out, but everything is okay. But we'll talk about that later. So let's go to GTII. So last time I mentioned, I went over I think the report of the receiver and also went over the possible acquisition target. I said I would look it over and I would discuss it with various people. And I did look it over and kind of spent some time looking through the acquisition document, whatever was filed or put online on the 8K that was filed. I also looked at the stock issuance, which would pay for the acquisition, and looked at some other stuff. And based on that, I had some questions that I posed to the Receivers Council and to our council. Our council, I believe, posed those to the Receivers Council. My basic questions are, I don't think there was enough information to make a determination about the deal. We didn't know how much the entity, whatever that entity was, it was an LLC, a limited liability company that was based in Puerto Rico. We didn't know what they were bringing to the table. Because we didn't know what they were bringing to the table, makes it kind of hard to decide if it's a good deal or not. The one thing that stood out, though, was that they were going to get substantial voting control over the company, this new entity. It depends how much they brought in, was my question. If they brought in some humongous amount of money, capital for the company, okay. If it's just some meager amount, then that's a different story. So what I've been informed, indirectly at least, it's not directly from the receiver, but what I've been informed indirectly is that, and let me add one other fact. There's a court hearing next Wednesday or Thursday, the 29th, I believe. It's a status hearing, so there's nothing that's going to be decided. But originally, there was a discussion that there was going to be approval sought as to this acquisition at this hearing on January 29th. And since our last live stream, I have confirmed that they will not be seeking approval of this deal on the 29th, that prior to the 29th, I think prior to the 29th or on or about the 29th, we'll receive more details about the proposed acquisition. Now, I still don't know if it's a good acquisition or not, and I'm not the one who's going to make that decision. As you recall, or you don't recall, or if I recall, I asked anybody with a deal or transaction or possible deal or transaction to reach out to the receiver's counsel. I know at least, I believe, at least a couple of people have, because they have indicated it to me in some fashion. I hope more than 2 people have. And again, I encourage, because we want the best deal. Now I'm speaking on behalf of, even though I don't speak on behalf of GTI shareholders, but I'm speaking with the mindset that as a GTI shareholders, and my shares are locked up, so I can't trade them. They're so even if we were able to be traded, I couldn't trade them. But obviously, I want the best deal for GTII shareholders. So anybody out there with a possible transaction in the interim, and certainly prior to the 29th, reach out to the receiver and the receiver's counsel or our counsel in Nevada. And if you need further information, reach out to me. So the grand scheme of things is there's not going to be a decision made on the 29th. We should have additional details about acquisition. If there's any other businesses interested, reach out. And we will hopefully, I think they said, but don't quote me on this one, or you can quote me, but I may be wrong. But I think by the end of this month, the audit that was in process should be completed. And I think they promised by the end of March that everything would be available. And hopefully that will reflect a change in the trading status. But I don't know that yet, because again, I'm not commenting either way, but the receiver does tries to be professional and keep a distance. So notwithstanding whatever questions I have thrown out, and by the way, when I threw out questions to the receiver's counsel, certain ideas I threw out them the last time, they were receptive to them. So it's not like they're not receptive. And again, we shall see what this deal is. And again, you all can make your decision. I have my own opinions. We will see. But I need questions answered. And it really depends upon what is being brought to the table, because that'll determine whether we have interest or not. So that's the way I look at it at this time. And that's all I know. And I will be attending in some fashion the hearing on the 29th, because like I said, I was informed that there will not be any request for permission to go forward with that acquisition on the 29th. But just to make sure, and if needed, I will be appearing in some fashion, whether that be by Zoom or in person. I haven't decided yet, but I'll keep you apprised after that date, and if there's any other information. That's next week, so I probably will have another update about GTI after the 29th, where I can bring you up to speed. Hopefully we'll have more information about the acquisition. And again, I urge, and I can't tell you, and I'm not doing this on behalf of anybody, this is me asking as a GTII shareholder, anybody out there who has an interest in doing a transaction with GTII, reach out now, or forever hold your peace. We're trying to get the best deal. So that's the last time I'm going to say that. I will keep you apprised of the next details when they happen, which again should be very soon. But that's it for GTII today. So that, and I think our last update was about a week ago, and I expect the next update within a week. If you have questions or comments, concerns, after I post a video, please post them. I try to look at them as I turn this way. I try to look at them as I go, but I'm not great at looking at the comments, so I'm better after the fact. So I hope you indulge me in that. And if you fix my right eye, I'd have a better time of being able to do that. So that's one, GTII. Second, MicroStrategy and crypto. So I don't know if all of you are interested in crypto. I am. I have, I think I've mentioned this. So I'm trying to make money in crypto for this period of time. I'm hoping to get out of my major positions in crypto within the next 6 months. But most of mine are pretty vanilla. I have IBIT, which is an ETF that is a Bitcoin ETF. I have a leverage ETF. I have unfortunately, an Ethereum ETF, and I own a tiny, tiny bit of MicroStrategy. Now, part of this is about just, and it includes mine, but it includes just watching videos about people promoting stocks. So if I'm a fan of X, and I don't mean that as Twitter, but I'm a fan of X, and I'm doing a video, and I'm a fan, I think it's easy to be manipulated, even if it's unintentional, by those videos. Because sometimes the people that are making those videos really are 100% all in, and they're not willing to consider any alternative or negative information. So they will just characterize any information that's adverse as FUD or nonsense or whatever, as opposed to accepting that nothing's black and white, and there's good and bad and ups and downs. So MicroStrategy is what I'm focusing on, and I have a very small position in that. I have owned it. Luckily, for whatever reason, and it was pure happenstance, I bought it at the right time, and I got out at the right time. And prior to that, I had owned Palantir, and Palantir had done very well, still doing very well, by the way. But I did, and now I'm trying Bitcoin, and I probably got in starting in the 80s of Bitcoin, and now I think today it's like 105. But it's through ETF, and I think I will keep Bitcoin long time. This is not financial advice, of course. I'm just kind of telling you what I'm doing. But part of it is now I watch all these videos, and all these guys are promoting everything. So MicroStrategy is an interesting one. This is Michael Saylor and his Bitcoin. We'll see what it actually ends up. But what happens is they've bought a ton of Bitcoin. I think they're about at 500,000 Bitcoin now. And what they do is they use either they do at the money offerings. So they basically sell stock. They use the proceeds. I think they and this is an example. So you're watching a video, and the video will say they're using all the proceeds to buy Bitcoin. I would be skeptical that they're using all the proceeds to buy Bitcoin, because they have to exist as an entity, and the revenue beyond that is very minimal. So, and this is not bad, but just being realistic, they probably have to use some of the sales revenue, one, to pay commissions, and two, to operate. So I don't think that's wrong, but that's just an example of slanting it so one-sided. But anyway, the premise is that he either sells at the money Class A, I think it's Class A shares, common stock. He recently sold some preferred stock, a small number, and the alternative is they have a debt, convertible debt. So what they did is they got the bond market, or people interested in fixed assets, who didn't want the volatility to buy bonds, and the bonds were paid 0% interest, but gave them an option to convert them to stock at some point in time. And yesterday, and so that's kind of the story. So what is ongoing is that they're selling, they've sold a lot of shares to use the money to buy a lot of Bitcoin, and they've bought Bitcoin all along. The difference is now the Bitcoin's a lot more expensive than it was when they started buying. So their average cost of Bitcoin is rising, and it's rising substantially. And as they continue to buy Bitcoin, and as Bitcoin stays in the range it is now, 105,000, let's say today, that will continue to raise the average. So is that a problem? No, but this isn't Bitcoin, it's a stock. So, and Bitcoin to this point in time, and that might change, and maybe they have factored this into the equation. But if Bitcoin goes through the normal cycles, to at least to this point in time, and I put normal in quotation marks because I think there's only been 3-4 year cycles to date. But if it goes through its cycle, what happens is it'll run high and then it'll correct substantially. So if you're buying Bitcoin, and I think Michael Saylor says that he'll buy at the tops because he doesn't care. I think in part because he thinks that will add value, because if he keeps on buying at the top, it will enhance the value, although he buys it privately over the counter, so it really doesn't have that influence. But if he continues to buy at the top and that it runs, it's going to substantially raise the average cost of Bitcoin. And the issue would be if Bitcoin has a normal cycle and dumps at some point in time. Let's say it dumps, not permanently, but temporarily. Let's say it dumps to 70,000 at one point in time. And let's say their average is at some point in time 90,000. Not that they're in trouble, but their stock might get killed because people will see that and they'll react. It's not like it's the asset itself, because Bitcoin, people could just hold on to the Bitcoin, but people might sell the stock. And if they go crazy and start selling the stock, that's what I could see as the problem. And it may not just be MicroStrategy. There's a bunch of other companies that decided to do this kind of strategy. Interesting. And it might be somebody who's not on as good terms as MicroStrategy, and they go out of business. And because they go out of business, there's a cascading effect. So that's really my concern. And all the hype videos where everybody just says it's nice, I think ignores that. Because I've seen, and I'm not going to call it a Ponzi scheme because I don't see it's a Ponzi scheme, because I don't think it's intended to be a Ponzi scheme. I've seen Ponzi schemes before, and sometimes they're done intentionally, and sometimes they kind of awry. So I've handled cases involving Ponzi schemes, usually in real estate. Sometimes it's where you have a crook and they're trying to rip off a bunch of people. That happens. Alternatively, sometimes what happens is, and this happened in real estate's going great. We're making tons of money. So let's use and we can't lose. So let's use our investor money because they're making tons of money, and let's leverage it further on this great idea. The great idea collapses, the real estate market dives, and they're stuck because they can't pay people off at that point in time. A lot of times Ponzi schemes are like that. I think they don't start off one way, but they kind of end up being like investors being abused. I don't know which one MicroStrategy is, or either. I'm sure they're well-intended. I just don't think they take, and again, I have a very small position in it, and I made money going up and again, I just happened to be at a right price, and it went up, and I got out pretty much near the top, not at the top, but pretty close enough. But again, it concerns me when the people are promoting without any caution, because I think it's concerning that people they'll spend money they shouldn't be spending. They'll target things they shouldn't be spending, and it may be all done in good faith, but you got to be somewhat critical. Well, I guess you don't have to be critical, but I try to be critical, at least in some respect. So as I was referencing GTII, I obviously, the receiver has glowing remarks, but I'm not a big fan of the acquisition at this point in time. That may change. That could all be done in good faith. In MicroStrategy, I'm sure it's done in good faith. I just believe that there's a risk there. And when there's a big dump in Bitcoin, I would be concerned. It's just I don't think you can anticipate all the ramifications of a transaction when you do it, even if you're trying to input it. I just think things escape consideration. Now, maybe with super duper computers in the future, they'll be able to kind of think more outside the box, even though they're in a box. But anyway, that's my MicroStrategy. I have concerns about what it'll do when there's a huge dump in the price of Bitcoin, especially after they continue to buy Bitcoin and raise their average price, which increases their risk, kind of like a short in a way, the way I look at it. So that's my MicroStrategy blather also. Yeah, XRP gonna flip BTC and ETH. I don't know because I'm just answering Thomas's question. Let's put it up there quickly. I just happened to see it. I know there's a big. I might as well talk about it since you brought it up. I know there's a big dispute that arose, or it is arising, because President Trump was going to, or at least one of his campaign promises was setting up a strategic Bitcoin reserve, or something akin to that. He put out a executive order, and it was more of a digital asset reserve. And apparently, the reason why it hasn't been settled upon a specific, whether it be Bitcoin alone, is because of XRP and the people at XRP, and they're shooting arrows at Bitcoin, and apparently the Bitcoin mainstays are shooting arrows back at XRP, and there's a feud that has arisen. So it'll be interesting to see which one prevails. Although since Bitcoin seems to be more of an institutional asset and more of a accepted asset, I think I would expect Bitcoin to prevail in that dispute. But I don't know who has XRP, who might have influence over the White House. I don't know, and I don't know if there's a company. I forgot the name of the company, but it's a company affiliated with the president that's a crypto company, a crypto related company that has bought crypto. And I think last week they bought a whole bunch of stuff, including, I think the majority they bought was Ethereum, which is kind of surprising, but I think it was Ethereum. I don't know if that's the majority they hold, but I think that is the majority position they hold. And so I don't know if XRP was in one of those particular bags that they hold, as they call them. But that is an important determination what that reserve is going to be. I know a lot of Bitcoin people were hoping for an immediate Bitcoin reserve. It wasn't announced yet, but there's a commission that's going to be set up, or a group. And Senator Loomis, I think, has got a bill that she's working on in Congress, in the Senate. And we'll see. We'll see how it works out. I assume there's going to be some kind of strategic reserve, whether it's 70% Bitcoin, 5% Ethereum, 10% XRP, etc. I don't know, but there'll be something, because that's I think it's in the works. And if they didn't do it, it would piss off a bunch of people. And it wouldn't seem to make sense if you were supporting something, especially if you had your own coin. So kind of that's a quickie on that. Yeah, I agree. Bitcoin's not a U.S. currency crypto, but it's considered to be the established and main currency. It'd be like the Mag 7. Everything else is subservient to it, at least worldwide, in terms of use or acceptance. So that's, but I appreciate your view, and you might be right. And I don't know what they're going to decide. And maybe there'll be like a strategic, and I think this is what I would do. I would do a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and then I would do a digital asset reserve, and I would have those as different. I would have completely different. The digital asset reserve would involve all other types of coins, stable coins, and the Bitcoin reserve would be separate and apart from that. I think they could fund both. I think they have approximately 200,000. The United States has about 200,000 Bitcoin that they haven't officially put into possession and use. And obviously they could purchase Bitcoin, although the supply is a fixed supply, and it'll go up in price. And they could do that with all coins. The difference is Bitcoin is a set amount. You can't add to it, although maybe you can. We'll see. But at this point in time, it's fixed at, I think it's 21 million. Bitcoin is the total amount. Not all of it's been issued. I think about 19 million plus has been issued. People think that about 4 or 5 million has been lost. So the actual number of Bitcoin might be about 14 or 15 million, something on that order. So that's why it makes it it's not an inflation. Well, people consider, I don't know what it is in terms of what it's going to do, but people consider it's not inflationary because it's not dilutable, or it's less dilutable also. So it's going to be interesting, though, to see what happens, because there is obviously a bunch of support for crypto in this administration. And, we don't know who has influence and what decisions will be made. And it'll be interesting. So I'm playing along. I played that, even though I didn't vote for, I voted for neither candidate, just so we're clear. I've said this before. But I bet on the Trump victory. So that's why I played Bitcoin and those choices prior to the election. So I think I made the right choice, and hopefully it'll turn out well. Although, again, be careful when you look at those videos that you don't get manipulated, that you don't buy the whole story. Be critical, because you can't trust anybody 100%, unless you know them 100%. You can't trust them 100%. So be critical, do your own analysis. Don't just accept the hype. 3. So that went a lot longer than I wanted to. LA weather and water. So LA weather. We're supposed to have rain starting maybe tonight, if not tomorrow. For most people, most places in the world, no big deal. LA rain doesn't happen a lot, and when you get copious amounts, it can cause issues. Now, the problem after fires is what happens is the fire burns the top of the soil and creates kind of a crust, and there's dirt. The dirt goes too, so the dirt kind of gets crystallized and also escapes as it's being, there might be water being shot and all kinds of things. So you end up with this surface. It rains, and it doesn't take a ton, but the water doesn't get absorbed into the ground because it can't, because of the surface. So especially if you're on the downside of a hill that's been denuded, so it's lost all its ground cover, you don't need a lot of water to move all the loose rocks, gravel, etc., down the hill. And so that's the concern. So I know I saw the news conference yesterday at the LAX airport, where the president was meeting with Newsom, the governor, who I'd like to not be governor another term. And then he went out on a journey and came back, and I think he saw it. But the issue of like possible rain, I think the incompetent mayor of LA, and this is not why she's incompetent, but the incompetent mayor of LA, who, by the way, when I was looking at her record, so her profession is she's an activist. That was what it shows. And that I think she was a physician's assistant at some point in time. And one of the positions she advocated, which is interesting, just keep in the back of your mind, one of the positions she advocated and supported, she supported the communist workers in Cuba. And that was a large part of her activism. Not a big fan of that, not big a fan of her. And again, I think she's not competent for the reconstruction job, and it should be either a construction manager, a real estate developer, builder, etc., but certainly not her. But she mentioned during the press conference possible rain, and I think the president kind of rolled his eyes. The reason why the possible rain is an issue is, again, because of what happens after fire. And I don't think a lot of other parts of the country have to deal with this, so they don't see it. So the race is to remove everything, they put out, like, literally, I think they ordered something on the order, I think I heard like 10,000 K-rails, which are these portable concrete rails that they'll put at the bottom of the hills or other spots that are helpful, and they direct the flow of water. But since there will be rain, and I said that I think they are indicating maybe about an inch of rain, that could be enough to trigger some kind of they say mudslides. I would say it's more like rock slides, etc. That's very hilly area, so it's likely to be a problem. It just depends on the intensity of the rain. What since I'm a weather fan, what we have is something called a cutoff low, which means there's a low pressure system, but it's kind of cut off from the jet stream. So the jet stream is the natural flow of air from the west to the east, and sometimes the systems will kind of deviate from it. They won't take the path of the jet stream. And that's what this is. And then you can't really tell exactly where it's going to come in. And sometimes they deviate. But this one apparently will kind of be over our area. And it's important to be aware of that, especially if you're here. Now, some things you have to kind of remember is, and I've kind of followed the discussion. There's no pipeline from Washington, state of Washington, or Oregon, or Canada to California, the state of California, for certainly not to Southern California. So there's not like a faucet you can turn on to bring the water here. Now, whether that's a good idea, whether to have a pipeline from an area that has an abundance of water, that's that's an argument. I can't argue with that depending on the cost. But currently, we don't have that. There are reservoirs, and there was one that was empty. So why do we need reservoirs? We need reservoirs because sometimes and most of our water up to this point in time comes from the Colorado River, but it comes through a aqueduct. And if there was a big enough earthquake, conceivably the aqueduct could be impacted, so you couldn't get water. So reservoirs are important to have in the local areas in case you couldn't get it from external. Part of the problem in Southern California is they never built enough ways of capturing storm rain. Like tonight, if it rains, I think it's like 95+% of that water goes into the ocean. So it should be recaptured because theoretically, you could use it to keep everything green, which would enhance or reduce the impacts of fire. Now, most of our fires, by the way, just to clarify, are not forest fires. I don't live in the forest. It just happens to be there's a lot of vegetation, but we're not in forests. For example, the Altadena fire, the other fire, it stopped or it went into the forest. That's the Angeles National Forest. It stopped. It didn't go beyond. So it wasn't really a forest management issue. And it's not that most fires don't happen in the forest. So that's a misnomer. Now, whether there should be, better forest management, et cetera, I can't argue with that because there probably should be. I think there's hundreds of millions of trees in forests that are dead that need to be removed, et cetera. But that's a big cost that needs to be undertaken. And I'm sure the federal government will support that. I hope they do, but it's something that needs to be done. But the reservoirs need to be kept also. But what's the issue? The real issue is just like other places that are limited water, Californians, particularly Southern California, and there is one in the San Diego area, should build a series of desalination plants offshore. The Pacific Ocean has a lot of water. Desalination plants exist. The only reason why desalination plants do not exist in California is because of the California Coastal Commission. California Coastal Commission is a commission designed to, in the quotation marks, protect the interests of the coast for California residents and inhabitants. However, they usually are very anti-development, anti-everything, probably too much to one extreme. And if they were gone, as long as people were reasonable, I think it would be probably better for the populace and for the citizens. It certainly would reduce costs. But if you put a series of desalination plants up and down Southern California offshore, you could supply more than enough water for everybody in Southern California without relying upon any other geographical area. You could also have enough water that if in fact there were fires, that you could divert water from those plants to be used. And let me talk about that. So we're still talking about using water to put out fires. We can't fly if it's too windy. We have that FOS check, that red stuff we put out on. Isn't enough time passed that firefighting techniques and technology shouldn't improve? So we shouldn't rely upon if it's not too windy, if the wind doesn't blow the water away, if we have enough manpower. I mean, to me, it seems like here's another scenario where robots, and in the future, robotics. Why not have an army of robots that fights fires? Why not, and have them available? The problem with the problem with planning for this kind of event, like it happened in LA, is the cities can't afford to stay on guard at that full level forever. But perhaps if you had a series of robots you didn't have to pay wages to, that were available and could intercede at a earliest part of a fire, maybe have, it may be, there's obviously a cost, but, and I'm just throwing out robotic firefighting as an example, but I can't imagine there's not better technology that shouldn't be invented to aid the firefighters, who are amazing. Again, these guys are amazing. Guys and gals are amazing. But why do they have to rely upon, fire hydrants and old techniques and old materials? There should be a way, and maybe in this new construction that should be considered. In the reconstruction, whatever reconstruction happens in the Palisades or Altadena, perhaps an element of the reconstruction should be actual active firefighting at each home. And, I would think insurance companies would be happy if that was incorporated. And perhaps that would be a way of getting insurance back into California. But there must be a way, because I know at the Getty Center, for example, so the Getty Center is a museum off of the 405 freeway that kind of runs on the west side. You've probably heard about it because there have been some fires around it. They have like a 1,000,000-gallon tank, and the place, I think it seals off. So there's a bunch of artwork in there. The place seals off to fire. So it has protected, it's fire protected in two ways: the water, and it shields itself from fire. But now there's going to be a whole rebuilding. I think there's an opportunity to rebuild and kind of advance ways people protect against fires. And again, I think not new construction, besides like interior sprinklers, which really doesn't do anything for you, because if you get something in the eaves, etc., that you're done for. But there should be systems, and again, I think this really should be under active consideration. There should be active systems put in new construction that deal with fire at that point, so that if in fact fire reaches a residence, there is some resistance at that point in time that might save a bunch of homes, save your home, save anybody's home. So water is an issue, but I think the desalination is the way to go, because that would be a self-sufficient, geographically local, and you would have more than enough water to green up everything, to provide a supply of water for fires, and to assist the firefighters. And again, I think robotic firefighters or something akin to that, or something way beyond that, would be helpful. And obviously you need good management. I don't know if getting rid of FEMA would be the way to go. I think that's what the president was discussing. I think having local management is good if you have good local management. But look where we are today. So if there was no FEMA and these jokers had to manage the situation, just imagine how long it would take to get it done. So I think we have to reflect upon no FEMA. Perhaps we just need a competent group to manage the local group. So perhaps maybe there's a new, maybe FEMA's cut down. It's got a whole bunch of special, super competent people who come in, manage the local situation. Maybe that's what they do, and they provide extra assets or something like that. But I don't think the locals, like just looking at what's going on in LA, for example, I don't think the locals are independently able to manage this. I don't think they're competent enough. Maybe that would force cities to have more competent people, probably not until they had like some big loss. Um, so so we talked about reservoirs, and it's all clear that the fire. It's not like the fire would have stopped. It wouldn't have. I mean, it's not like the fire wouldn't have started, because the fire would have started. It's all about management, how you could have managed it. And again, I believe that fire technology has to improve to assist all the brave firefighters. Last, so that's that. So that's the fire stuff. Last but not least, this has nothing to do with anything above, is going to be a movie review, and I'm going to start off kind of little backwards in time. So I saw the controversy that arose about Elon Musk and his hand gesture. Some people accused him of making. I mean, a lot of people accused him of making a Nazi salute. Now I looked at it, and again, I'm not a big fan of the Nazis, nor am I comfortable with the Nazis. Just a brief reminder: my parents were Holocaust survivors. My mom she's now deceased, spent her teenage years enjoying the fruits of Auschwitz, etc. So, not a big fan. And I actually saw the gesture, and I don't think it is one, it's not a gesture I feel comfortable with, period, whether it's intended or not intended. So whenever I see it, it makes me uncomfortable. So I'd rather people not do it than do it. However, when somebody does at least as far as I can see, when somebody does a Nazi salute, they don't touch their heart first. It's just the straight where they hold their arm out in a particular manner. So I don't think technically it was. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he was a little, this is my view. He was either a little drunk, a little stoned or something at that time. He certainly was really super upbeat. Seemed like a little bit too upbeat. But maybe he was just like super enthusiastic. I don't know. But I think he just got a little lost. And again, I think he's been accused in the past of not having great social sense. And notwithstanding the fact that he's, obviously a great entrepreneur and has brought a lot of technology to the forefront that wouldn't have otherwise come for, there's concern about his social abilities. And I have the same concern about his social abilities. So when I saw that, it made me, just be honest, in light of my background, my parents' background, it made me uncomfortable. But I looked at it, and to me, it doesn't look like it is. But a couple days later on X, he posted a bunch of jokes. And either somebody, hacked him, which I'd be surprised if they did, or he just thought they were funny. And he referenced a bunch of Nazi scumbags and made jokes about them. And I just think that's just a bad sense. Again, brilliant guy, brings great technology and entrepreneurship, but has no social sense and says a lot of stupid stuff. And I didn't appreciate his stupid. And I gave him the benefit of the doubt for his for the gesture and anything else, but I don't for his stupid jokes. And I don't that nobody advises him that they're stupid and inappropriate. And so that's my view. I don't think he's mean-spirited or not well-intended. I just think he has no social sense. And that's why also it concerns me when he's involved in government, because again, that's lack of social sense doesn't just exist in the dark. It impacts everything. And again, I have a split with him. On one hand, I appreciate and respect and and welcome his technology and all his entrepreneurship. I watch SpaceX launches from my house. As a matter of fact, yesterday morning, about 6 a.m., there was a launch from Vandenberg Air Force Base. I walked outside before I walked my dog. Aggie, my dog, my solo dog now, and I saw the launch. I saw that kind of going over LA. And because of the conditions, it was super cool because of the lighting. I appreciate all that. I don't appreciate the lack of sense. And again, that part causes me concern. So that's why I'm uncomfortable when somebody who's not elected has that much power. If you're elected, the people have made a choice. If you are not elected, it causes me concern. So this is going to somehow get to a movie review. So I saw that, and then it made me think. I was literally thinking about that. In 1977, Jimmy Carter was president. And again, this is a sore topic for me. And I'm going to get to the movie review. Jimmy Carter was president, and there was a Nazi group that wanted to march through Skokie, Illinois. And Skokie was I don't know if it is now, but it was a highly Jewish area with a bunch of Holocaust survivors. And the Supreme Court heard the case and said because the language, I think it was something like, because the language was neutral and there's a neutrality standard, that they were allowed to march. And it was really disgusting, by the way. And I remember that very clearly. And ACLU, I think, represented the Nazis, if you can imagine that. And then I saw a movie, and this is the movie, and which made me think about all those things, and it included Elon's jokes and that thing at Skokie, and the movie is September 5th. So September 5th, if I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Munich. Munich was about the Israelis' attempts to settle the score after, in part, the Israelis settling the score after the 1972, September 5th, 1972 killings in Munich during the Summer Olympic Games. And I remember those Summer Olympic Games. I would have been 13 in the Summer Olympics in 1972. Olympics were huge. 68 Olympics were in Mexico City. I remember those. I was 9 years old, but I remember what stood out in the Mexico City Olympics, besides the fact that it was very smoggy and it was very at high elevation, was Bob Beamon was set the long jump record at elevation at Mexico City, and he broke the record. I think it was like 29 feet. His jump was something on the order of like 29 feet 3 inches, and that broke the record by like a foot and a half or something outrageous in that sport. But anyway, the 72 Olympics come. It was in Munich, and it was a big deal. I think Mark Spitz, who was also a Jewish athlete, he was a swimmer, and he won, I think, like 7 gold medals at that particular Olympics. So there's a movie, Munich, and might be other movies that talk about that particular incident. And again, before I get the movie review, this kind of made me think about where I was. So I was 13 years old. I was thinking, and I wanted to verify, so I did today. But I was thinking, I remember where I was. On September 5th, 1972, I was at Dodger Stadium. I was at a baseball game with my father. He took me. My father was an immigrant, but he somehow attached to the Dodgers. So we went to a baseball game. He had a small liquor store near MacArthur Park, LA, and the liquor companies used to give their businesses really good tickets. So we would go occasionally, not very often, maybe 3-4 times a year. We would go. We went that night. I looked, it was either a Tuesday or Wednesday night. So I remember this event was ongoing, the Munich incident involving the Israeli hostages, and the name of the organization that were deemed the perpetrators, it was called Black September. And that was the first time, I believe, that the word terrorist or terrorism was used. And it wasn't an American characterization. I believe it was a characterization by German officials. So because this was in Germany, but this was where terrorism, the name began, and 1972. So I thought about that and where I was at Dodger Stadium. What stood out as we're watching the game, we were on the. It's funny what you remember. This is 52 years ago, and I still remember. Although I didn't really think about it until I thought about it today after that movie. I'm sitting on. We're on the first base side, and and I always had a transistor radio with me. So there was no computers, no internet, whatever, but I always had multiple sources of information then. So I would listen, I'd watch TV, I'd have a radio in my ear, read a lot of newspapers. I was a young kid, but that was kind of my thing. So we're at the game and they're reporting on what's going on. I think there was a false report, whatever. At some point in time, the report came in that the athletes got killed. The Israeli athletes got killed by the group that was called Black September. And then I remember that it started to rain. And this is September in LA. It never rains. And I remember it, and I looked today to verify that it was raining like I remembered. So I went back and I looked back on the weather almanac in 1972, September 5th at Dodger Stadium, because the actual deaths occurred September 6th in Germany, but they were ahead of us by several hours. And I looked, and starting about 8:30 till about 10, it was raining in downtown LA. So my recollection about the rain was correct. And what it reminded me of was it almost was like the sky was crying over this event because it was so disturbing and sad, because everybody, up until that point in time, I don't think there had ever been an incident at the Olympics. It was deemed a safe place, and it was startling, really startling. And everybody I think they paused the Olympics for a day. They didn't cancel them, but they paused them for a day, and it was startling to everybody. So that's kind of my recollection of that day when I was 13 years old. So the movie takes the view of that particular day, but from the position of a TV, like a producer or director, and takes us through that time period. Now, Munich, I thought was really good movie. I thought this was average. The subject matter, I think, is really interesting. The length of the movie, I think, was great. It was only 94 minutes. I'm a big fan of that. But I don't think it quite captured the drama of the moment. And I'm not going to tell you anything more about how it's presented. I kind of give you a background of the details of the movie. But if I were going to do that movie, I would have just done one thing differently. And maybe, if you happen to see the movie, just pretend this is there. Put a clock. Just put a running clock in the top right-hand corner. And I think that would have added a lot of dramatic flair to the movie. So that's kind of my view. So I watched the entire 94 minutes, but I was, into the subject matter. If I wasn't into the subject matter, would I have stayed the entire 94 minutes? Probably not. I didn't think it was great, but again, I'm a pretty critical of movies. I thought the subject matter was really interesting. I didn't think the portrayal was super dramatic. So that's my view, and I'll give it a 47 minute. I would, if I didn't like the subject matter, but it's probably good for about 47 minutes, and then I would have left. Anyway, I hope that's entertaining. I know you love Elon. I have like mixed feelings. I'm like, to be honestly, I have mixed feelings about Elon. I appreciate what he does, and I don't like him socially. I don't like what he says socially, and have concerns about that. And not everything he says. In this particular matter, I didn't think he was. I thought, again, just not lack of sense, and lack of direction, lack of willingness to take direction. If somebody had the sense to tell him that if you want to defend yourself about making Nazi gestures, don't defend yourself by making about it, by basically making jokes about a bunch of historically some of the most historical criminals of all time. Period. That's my view. But be that as it may, I appreciate his technology, and I understand how I understand more than you understand because I deal with a lot of Tesla people. I understand how Tesla people love him. That goes back to my original point about MicroStrategy. I don't buy anything 100% from anybody. I just don't accept it. And even if I'm in, I'm not 100% in. I always have a little bit of concern, caution, etc. No matter what it is, no matter who it is. And part of that's training, part of that is just being real. That's what happens. Anyway, be that as it may, we did our thing. Hope everybody is great. Everybody have a great day. If you have questions or comments, I will read them and hopefully respond. I hope everybody's well. After I hear back on GTII next week, I will certainly update you. And if I have any new news about anything else, or I see any movies, I will let you know. Everybody be well, take care, and have a great day. Really.